Welcome to the Damascus Road podcast. On the road to Damascus, Paul had a radical encounter with Jesus and his life was changed forever. That is what we hope and pray for here. Now, on to this week's episode.
So today I want to start us off with a question. Have you ever heard of a golden birthday before? Now, if you don't know what that is, a golden birthday is when the date of your birthday and your age match up. So for example, my birthday is September 13th, so my golden birthday happened when I was 13, so 13 on the 13th. Unfortunately, I did not know what a golden birthday was until I met my husband Tyler, so my golden birthday went woefully uncelebrated. However, Tyler's birthday is on December 29th, and since he was only 24 when we started dating, I had some time to actually figure his golden birthday out. Now, was I perhaps just trying to live vicariously through his birthday since I didn't get to have a golden birthday? Maybe, but that's not the point today. So I thought long and hard about what to do, and the idea I landed on was to give Tyler 29 gifts on his 29th birthday. Yes, you heard that correctly. 29 gifts. Apparently I was just going for like a Dudley Dursley kind of birthday. I started off really strong with my ideas. So gift one was a reusable Colorado tumbler thing from Starbucks. And gift two was planning a birthday game night with friends because experiences definitely count in the gifts. Much Mario Party was played. Gift three was fancy honeycomb chocolates because Tyler loves honeycomb with chocolate. Gift four was going to the Titan Missile Museum. And so this one actually kept a surprise. So I just told Tyler to get in the car at a certain time and we started driving somewhere. And he thought this was super fun and it ended up being really cool and he loved the Titan Missile Museum. But given how many true crime podcasts I consume, me telling him to just get in a car and let me drive him to an undisclosed location probably should have concerned him more. Gifts 5 and 6 were multiple varieties of delicious teas, perhaps to be put in the aforementioned Colorado cup. And gift 7, more candy, maybe? As you can see, I stalled out pretty quickly. I started off really strong on the gifts, but soon realized that 29 is kind of a lot. A lot of planning, a lot of very panicked Amazon scrolling, and ultimately, a lot of pairs of socks to round out the gifts. And I did pull off all 29 in the end, but it was very down to the wire, and it literally required me to write out a spreadsheet of the gifts so I didn't forget anything. I wanted to do this elaborate, super special thing for Tyler's birthday, but I had no idea how complicated I was going to be making it, or how much I would realize that my ability to count to 29 is not as good as it probably should be. And ultimately, Tyler loved his golden birthday, and I did have a lot of fun with the gifts. But it does illuminate my internal bent to make things just a little more complicated than they need to be. No, we can't do things the easy way. We need to add like 5 to 10 more steps, and then we're good. It can't be that simple. And sometimes it isn't. Life can be really full of complicated events and emotions and people, and we all struggle at least a little bit to make sense of that complexity. We each devise ways of dealing with the challenges that life throws at us, some of which are healthy and some of which are not. We see movies or TV shows where someone makes this dramatic change and everything starts looking up for them. So we assume that in order for us to see change, we need to do the same thing. We need to quit our jobs, move abroad, and eat, pray, love our way back to happiness. If we want to get healthy, we've got to follow that Instagram influencer and only eat green things that we blend together in the most expensive Vitamix we can possibly find. To get on top of our finances, we need to download like 5 different apps, start a credit card churning schedule, find all the tax deductions we can, and then start our own micro business while we're at it. I mean, Bruce Wayne had to go to a remote monastery on a snowy mountain and train for months to become Batman. And really, isn't that all what we're trying to do in the end? Whether it's from what we watch or the social media we consume or just the people around us, we can feel underwhelmed with our own non-Batman lives and think, if I was just like them, if I did the same things they did, if I had the same position or influence or body or house or family that they did, then I would be good. I would be happy. In order to fix our loneliness, our mental health, our financial status, our dissatisfaction with our jobs or relationships, wherever it may be, we sometimes think that the solution must be big and complicated. A new job needs to materialize for us. The perfect opportunity needs to just be handed over. Or a significant other is going to pop right into our lives, perfect and ready to marry us right there. Or we try to plan like 12 steps ahead for everything, making sure that every detail of our life plans is perfectly aligned to what exactly we want it to be. Now, planning for our futures isn't bad, and sometimes big life changes do just happen to us. But we run into a problem when that is our only way of thinking that things are ever going to change, and especially when we start to put that back on God. We certainly can and should come before God with boldness in our prayers, handing over our hopes and our dreams and our fears. But are we actually willing to do what God says in order to change and get well if it doesn't perfectly fit our vision of what we think that change should look like? What if instead of giving us something grand and complicated, God is calling us into something simple? We think that we need something big for us to get well, but what if the answer is actually something small? And as you might have guessed already, we're going to be digging into this idea more through our study on the prophet Elisha. But we're going to get to Elisha in just a minute. First, let's meet our main character for today, a man named Naaman. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. And here we get a quick snapshot of Naaman's life. He is a respected military commander for a king of Aram, Damascus in Syria. Naaman has a successful career and the admiration of royalty, all of which sounds pretty awesome. But he does have a very significant limitation in his life. He suffers from leprosy, a serious skin condition that had devastating social consequences across many cultures in his day and today as well. I imagine that even with all of his military victories, Naaman's life was full of physical and social challenges from his illness. And so it makes sense that Naaman would want to be well. He wants to be free of his disease. And as it happens, he comes into a potential solution. There is a young servant girl in his household who's from Israel, and she encourages Naaman to go find the prophet in Samaria, aka our holy man Elisha. Now, just a quick geopolitical history lesson for some context here. This is in the divided kingdom period that we've mentioned before on Sunday. So at this point, Israel is split into two different things. We have the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. So the capital of Israel is Samaria. The capital of Judah is Jerusalem. Today, we're going to be in Samaria in Israel because that's where Elisha is. And so Naaman tells the king of Aram about this prophet, our holy man Elisha, and he gets the green light to go to him. Go and visit the prophet, the king of Aram told him. I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel. So Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, with this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy. Now, there's a lot more to Naaman's story that we're going to get into, but I want to pause right here and emphasize something really important that Naaman does. He goes. Naaman doesn't sit in Syria and complain and wonder why his leprosy isn't being magically healed. Naaman sees where help can be found and he goes after it. When what we're doing isn't working, and God calls us to go seek help, whether that be through wise friends, through counseling, through a church community, or something else, it does us absolutely no good to sit where we are and expect it to just come find us. God is very rarely in the habit of just waving a magic wand over things, and far more often partners with us to produce change in our lives. God asks us to do something, and then God shows up in the ways that only God can. And so Naaman goes to Israel to meet Elisha, hoping he will be healed. But it doesn't go quite how he expects it to. Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message. Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of your leprosy. But Naaman became angry and stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me, he said. I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana and the Pharpar, better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. Elisha gives Naaman a simple task to get well. Wash 7 times in the Jordan River. And I'm sure Naaman has done way more difficult things in his life. Doing a cannonball into the Jordan, which I assume is the biblically accurate method of healing, should be easy enough for him. But Naaman is not satisfied. He wants something much bigger. After years of being unwell, Naaman cannot believe that the answer would be something so simple. Surely Elisha should have to come out and do something grand, or give Naaman some task that would make him look appropriately awesome in order to be healed. But that just isn't the answer, and Naaman is not happy about it. And Naaman's response reflects how we sometimes respond to the idea of simple steps to get well. We're dissatisfied. We want relief, we want healing, we want a change in our lives. But our expectation of how that change should happen is often not aligned with what God actually provides. Let's take a closer look at the solution Elisha gives to Naaman. "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of your leprosy." First, we see that the response from Elisha for Naaman to get well is simple. Go and wash. Simple does not necessarily mean easy, but rather that it is not grand and showy. It is simple, small, unnoticed. Later in the Gospels, Jesus tells his followers to go pray in a closet rather than do the showy prayers in the street that the religious leaders of the day would do. Do the simple thing, not the thing that leads to you looking more impressive. And second, Elisha's response is active. Go and wash yourself. We're not passive consumers, but active disciples. And to be clear, we don't do things to earn or create our salvation. Jesus has already taken care of that, and there's nothing we can do that would make God love us more or love us less. We're not trying to do God's job, but rather responding to God's invitation to active participation in life with God, into a life that blooms out of the grace already lavished upon us by Jesus Christ. And third, Elisha's solution is repeated. Go and wash yourself 7 times. Elisha doesn't give Naaman a one-time fix, but something repeated over time. More often than not, the things that actually help us are the habits that we do consistently. One salad or one workout is not going to fix our health, but repeatedly choosing healthier options just might. Cramming for an exam one time is not going to fix our grades, but repeated and consistent study habits every week might. I know some people who every time there's a significant family conflict or an issue, their solution to it is to go on a vacation or shopping spree, something big and showy that they can do one time and that'll just fix everything. But one vacation or one splurge is never going to fix years of trauma and unhealthy patterns of conflict. It will take repeated acts of care, counseling, and proper conflict resolution to get well. The patterns that help us to get well are just that. They're patterns, repeated actions, and not just something we do one time and get it over with. And seeing that Elisha's way for Naaman to get well is simple, active, and repeated, let's take a look at Naaman's counterproposal. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana and the Pharpar, better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" Naaman's idea of how to get well is pretty different from Elisha's. First, he wants something big and complicated. For Elisha to wave his hand, call on the name of God, maybe do some backflips while he's at it. He wants something big and dramatic, either a grand act of power from Elisha or some opportunity for Naaman himself to look heroic and awesome. Naaman's method is also passive, saying, "I expected him," meaning Elisha, "to do such and such." The healing should just happen to Naaman, with little seeking or effort on his part. He shouldn't have to change or go out of his comfort zone. And finally, he wants something that's just one time. No repetition, no consistency. Just do the healing once and be done. And we, like Naaman, might want to get well or see change in our lives, but our idea of what that should look like more often resembles Naaman's method than Elisha's. We think that we need something complicated and dramatic that will make us look good, for something that doesn't require us to do anything differently or to be uncomfortable at all. And of course, it should be a one and done kind of deal. We want our healing and provision from God to be like going to Costco, where we can just go once and stock up on everything we need and not have to go back to God for a while. Rather than simply making a budget and sticking to it, we want to win the lottery or get promoted or make it big in Bitcoin. Instead of simply going to counseling, we want everyone else to change how they act and cater to us, or for God to just heal us and make every sticky internal problem we have just magically disappear. Rather than investing in relationships, we want God to just send us a best friend, or we want to move, because clearly people in another city that we don't know at all are going to make us feel less lonely than the friends we have right here. Instead of simply spending 5 minutes alone each day with God, we want the church to give us deeper teaching, or for some profound spiritual experience just happen to us on a retreat, or for someone else to come up with that perfect retreat or class or whatever that will fit my exact preferences and needs, and then maybe I'll come. And if all that could just show up on my doorstep in an Amazon box so I don't have to go get it and then I never have to do it again, that would be great. Thanks. But Naaman's way is just not the way that actually works. It's Elisha's way, the simple, active, and repeated way that leads to real change, to real transformation and flourishing in God. It reflects Jesus' call to life with him. Then he said to the crowd, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me." And again, we see the kind of steps here that lead to real change. They're simple. Give up your way, take up your cross, follow Jesus. And remember here that simple does not mean easy. They're active. You must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow him. And they're repeated. Take up your cross daily. Not just when it's convenient, not just at Christmas and Easter, but consistently and faithfully. In Matthew, we see Jesus get at this point again, this time with the Pharisees. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments." The Pharisees here are trying to trip Jesus up. To them, legalism and following complex rules perfectly are what make them right with God and above others. But Jesus says it's simpler than that. It's loving God and loving others at the center. Simple, active, repeated actions that flow out of the love God has already shown to us. If we're following these simple things, actively and consistently choosing to love God and love others well, the complicated stuff will start to take care of itself. And I experienced this coming out of my senior year of college. So in undergrad, I studied Arabic, and I was in a specific program that culminated in a year-long study abroad opportunity in Morocco. And from my freshman year, I had been preparing to go to another country for an entire year after my final semester of college. But when I actually got to my senior year, I wasn't so sure I wanted to do that. I was torn between feeling like I had put so much effort into studying and preparing for this and not wanting to choose to stay in Tucson just because I felt nervous, but also feeling like it just really wasn't what I wanted anymore, and I was only going to please other people or to look impressive. And the second half of my senior year had me racked with anxiety and guilt over choosing to go to Morocco or to stay in Tucson. And I desperately wanted someone or something else to just make the decision for me. I wanted God, or even just someone else in my life, to tell me exactly what to do, to give me a clear sign and direction, do this. And I wanted perfect clarity and certainty in that decision. In other words, I wanted what Naaman wanted. Something big, something passive that would just be given to me, and one time to help me through this. But the steps God gave me instead were a lot more like what Elisha gave. Simple, active, and repeated. In a lot of prayer and reflection on this decision, God didn't say, choose this or have some grand sign or revelation for me. But instead I found that I needed to make the decision, knowing that God would be with me in either place. And then I needed to put the time and energy in to actually process my emotions around that choice. Rather than allowing me to put all my fears and anxiety about this decision in the hands of someone else, God led me to a place where I could choose to stay in Tucson, grieve the loss of the opportunity I thought I was going to have, and lean into how God was growing me in that space over the next year. There was no big revelation or sign or something that just told me exactly what to do. Just consistent prayer, emotional processing, and space to reflect and pay attention to what God was doing in my life, day after day. It was a long process, but God was faithful to help me grow in that space and to eventually take joy in my decision to stay here in Tucson rather than feeling constantly guilty or resentful about that choice. And those simple, active, repeated steps to get there led to contentment and peace around my decision. But what about Naaman? Was he able to take those simple, active, repeated steps to get well? The last we saw, he had stormed off in a rage, angry over how Elisha had told him he could get well. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times, as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant." Naaman's officers are really good friends here. Rather than just letting Naaman feel self-righteous and stay comfortable, they gently but firmly call him out on this. If Elisha had told you to do something way harder than wash yourself 7 times in a river, you wouldn't have hesitated. If he'd given you a monumental task or told you to lead people into battle or climb mountains, you would have done it. So when he gives you this small thing, shouldn't you be just as willing? If you say that you will be faithful in the big things, then you need to show that you can be faithful in the small, simple things as well. And amazingly, Naaman listens to them. He goes into the Jordan River, he washes himself 7 times, and he is healed. It is a true miracle. Through this temperamental Syrian general, not even an Israelite, God shows the power and care of our Creator God. Naaman takes this step into trusting God, and he is healed. And this shows us just one more important aspect of the steps God gives us to be well. Simple, active, repeated, and stepping out in trust with God. God cares about us getting well, but what God is most concerned with is our transformation into people that reflect the love and grace of Christ in our world. Rich Vildas puts it this way in his book, The Deeply Formed Life. God is committed to our transformation. He is not in the business of simply improving our lives. He wants to infuse them with his life. In giving God's commitment to our transformation, God doesn't just respond to our desire to get well with quick fixes, one-time acts of grandeur, or opportunities to make us look awesome. God gives us ways to grow, to become more aligned with the character of Jesus in our everyday lives. Now, does God do incredible miracles and intercede directly into our lives in insane ways? Yes, God absolutely does. We've seen many stories of this in the story of Elisha, showing God's power and provision in miracles. And Jesus did amazing miracles over and over again, healing people with paralysis and leprosy, feeding thousands of people, even raising the dead to life. But Jesus coupled those miracles, the big and amazing stuff, with a call to the small, less showy things. To prayer, generosity to the poor, loving your neighbors and your enemies, and so on. Even when there wasn't a big miracle, Jesus was pretty consistent in his teachings about the need to be faithful in the simple, active, repeated acts of trust in God in our daily lives. More often than a grandiose gesture, God responds to us with an invitation to trust God, to lay down our need for control and image management, and to live out daily rhythms of simple, active, repeated life with God. And in that, we will find true contentment and joy. Is God calling you towards steps to get well that are simple, active, repeated, and require you to trust God? It's easy for us to think that, well, I tried that before and it didn't work, or to think that we're just beyond these kind of simple solutions. But I want to emphasize a few really important things here. First, simple is not necessarily easy. Simple is about the small, often unnoticed stuff. Choosing to pray when we'd rather just hop on our phones, choosing to say something kind or not say anything at all when we'd rather say something clever and hurtful. Choosing to serve where it's needed rather than to be in the spotlight. Choosing to go to counseling and to process our emotions and our traumas rather than expecting that God is just going to make it all go away. And simple is coupled with us making active choices, choosing to be disciples rather than just passive consumers. God loves us dearly, and real love means that God won't just override us to make us get closer to God. We have to be active in the process, not because our salvation is dependent on it. It most certainly isn't, but because real love cannot be demanded or manipulated. It can only be responded to and reciprocated. Simple, active choices repeated over time lead to patterns that form us deeply, helping to ground ourselves in love and grace and respond to the world around us from that deep center rather than from the shallowly formed patterns that the world gives us. And when we are reluctant to engage with the simple, active, repeated steps to get well, it can be helpful to ask ourselves some questions here. Is what we're doing now working? If I tried the simple stuff before, what didn't work from that? And if I tried it, did I only try it for a short time or inconsistently? The truth is, we're just never beyond the simple stuff. For example, I've heard some feedback before about having kind of the same application points in growing closer to God. Silence, solitude, prayer, reading the Bible, Sabbath, so on. Surely, though, there's something more, or something more interesting and modern, or I'm just too mature and experienced of a Christian for those, baby Christian steps. I should be doing something more advanced for my relationship with God. Those things are irrelevant to me now. But I want to make something very clear here. I am not beyond any of those steps in getting close to God. You are not beyond any of those steps in getting close to God. Our staff, our teaching team, our entire church is not beyond those simple steps. And I say that with great confidence because even Jesus, the literal Son of God, still did those things. Jesus took time to be alone. Jesus prayed. Jesus resolved conflict. Jesus practiced Sabbath. Jesus gave to the poor. The steps that get emphasized in growing in spiritual and emotional maturity are the habits of Jesus. And quite frankly, if Jesus still did them, then there is no way that any of us are past those steps ourselves. If Jesus still needed such simple, active, repeated rhythms as consistent silence, prayer, time in community, and so on, then we probably still need it too, no matter how spiritually or emotionally mature we are or think we are. And I want to ask a really honest question here. Have you actually done this? Just hearing about simple practices over and over again is not the same thing as you actively, consistently, repeatedly doing those practices again and again. Before you search for that bigger, more grand solution to getting close to God or to working through our internal issues or to having better, deeper relationships, make sure you've actually done the simple wash and be clean steps. Simply, actively, repeatedly, trusting God that when you follow through on those things, God will meet you in that space. If we're struggling with loneliness, the solution is not to just expect lifelong friends to just magically appear in our living rooms. The solution is still consistently reaching out to others, finding community, and learning to listen well and to be a good friend to the people around us. If we're trying to improve our financial health, the solution is not to win the lottery or work 4 jobs and never sleep. The solution is working on making a budget, choosing to spend less and spend wisely, dealing with the unhealthy scripts and patterns we have around money, and learning consistently to choose contentment and generosity over materialism and scarcity thinking. For our emotional health and maturity, we're not going to just wake up one day and magically be more wise and mature and centered. It doesn't work like that. We need to pursue counseling, to engage with good teaching and resources in this area, and to commit to vulnerability and accountability in trusted relationships again and again if we want to grow here. And are all of these things super fun and easy to do all the time? No, of course not. A lot of these things can be very, very challenging for us. I've been through several seasons of counseling, and it's not always a super fun time to work through all of your internal trauma and unhealthy monologues. It's hard. You may have a really hard time with starting to budget or learning to be vulnerable or choosing to spend time in silence and prayer every day. But just because it's hard and just because it feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not worth it. Our culture is very focused on just what feels good and makes us comfortable. And in some ways, there's some good things in that and how we learn to engage with ourselves and others. But that bent towards comfort and what makes us feel good in the moment can blind us towards the steps we need to really grow. Simple is not easy, and these steps can look different for different people in different seasons of life. But those are always the steps to getting well. Simple, active, repeated, trusting God all the time. Do the simple things with consistency, and God will change your life. It's really not more complicated than that. If we want Christ to be formed in us, we need to actually follow his model to learn to live and believe and act as he does. And then we trust the Holy Spirit to form us in the likeness of Christ. And the summer study that we're doing on the good and beautiful God can be really helpful here. The content is great, and there's reflective questions and practices that help us to actually follow through instead of just nodding along with whatever the book says. And I encourage you to find a small group, connect, and actually engage with the book along with others this summer. Don't just read it, but read it and discuss it and do the practices every week. Simple, active, repeated. That's what creates space for God to work in our lives. And even if it took a little while, Naaman took those simple, active, repeated steps to get well, trusting the God of Elisha that he could get there. And one thing about Naaman's 7 dips in the river is that it closely resembles baptism, being washed by the water as an outward symbol of choosing to trust God in God's power and love in our lives. Baptism is the big event that precedes a lifetime of learning to follow God, to surrender our control, to learn God's patterns of love and care for others, and to live them out day after day. And today, we'll actually see one of our wonderful church interns, Leah Gonzalez, choose to make this commitment in baptism, and I'm so excited to share that with you all. And usually baptism is just one dip, but I love that Elisha had Naaman dip 7 times, showing us that over and over again, we have to go under the water. We have to choose to follow God, choose to become more like Christ in our lives, choose to humble ourselves before the one who loves us and wants us to come home. It's not one big gesture and we're done, but a lifetime of stepping back into the water, choosing to trust God over and over again. Our choice to take those simple, active, repeated steps to practice those smaller acts of trust over time allows for the kind of interior transformation that God is always committed to, infusing our lives with God's love and way of being. Over and over again, we come back to God to wash and be clean. Every simple step is one back to God, another chance to come back and be loved. Please pray with me. Lord, I thank you that you give us ways to come back to you. I pray that we are each able to take the simple, active, repeated steps in our lives to trust you, that when we step forward in faith, you are faithful to meet us there, Lord. That you help us to grow, you help us to align our character more and more with Christ, Lord. That you don't just leave us to just figure it out on our own, but you are there to work with us, God. That you are with us and present with us as we learn to walk ever closer to you, Lord. I just pray over each of us that you give us wisdom in what those simple, active, repeated steps are in each of our own lives, Lord. Give us the trust in you to step forward in those things, and that even when we stumble, know that you are there, that you love us and you care for us, and you are with us, God. I thank you so much for this image of Naaman choosing to follow you, choosing to go under the water 7 times, Lord, to be washed and be clean and to show your healing and your power, God. And I pray just that we remember each of those examples in Scripture, that we remember those examples in our lives and we use them to turn back towards you, to come back home and into your love where you are helping us to grow more and more as your children, Lord. We love you, and in your Son's holy name, amen.
Thank you for joining the Damascus Road podcast. Our mission is to follow Jesus together by being with God, loving everyone, transforming people, developing leaders, growing new ministries, and changing the world. You can find out more about us online at DamascusRoadTucson.com.